Welcome back to another video, everyone. I'm Rachel from LoCasa, and today we are talking about some of the top red flags when analyzing short-term rental markets. Before you invest into that perfect short-term rental market, there's things that you need to see. We at LoCasa have analyzed over 300 short-term rental markets in the last couple of years, and these are the common red flags that you'll want to pay attention to before moving forward with a deal. So today, I'm sharing exactly what you can watch out for so you can avoid these expensive mistakes. After us helping hundreds of investors choose profitable markets, these are the important signs that you can't afford to miss. Whether you're just starting out or you're expanding into new markets, these warning signs will help you avoid the common pitfalls that trap most investors. First up, we're going to talk about saturated market indicators. So when I was first starting out in 2019, I had picked up 3 properties in Las Vegas, and then I had moved to Dallas, Texas, where I picked up another 3 shortly after, right before the pandemic. Right smack dab before the pandemic. But that's not the point here. All the way from about 2020 to 2022, I noticed that everybody and their mom was talking about how saturated Houston was. So that was one of the main markets that I kind of stayed away from. Everyone was saying there was everybody picking up units there. There's an Airbnb on every block, blah, 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 blah. So when you're hearing through the grapevine that Houston is a really saturated market, usually I'm going to believe it. Nowadays, a lot of people are talking about Arizona and Scottsdale specifically and how it's so saturated. I'm one of those people that truly believes if you invest into design and uniqueness for your property, you will win. Obviously, it also comes down to management and it comes down to location. If you have a phenomenal design, if you have a ton of unique amenities, you're going to attract bookings. But if it's 2 hours away from where the city is and nobody's visiting out there, obviously that plays a part. If you have a combination of these important factors, and this is for a whole nother video, but let's just run through it real quick. Location, rental price, because we're talking about arbitrage here, even if you purchase it. Design, uniqueness, management. Those are all the most important factors that you could truly think of. But if you're going into a saturated market and you're going to be in that market, obviously getting it for a good rent price is going to be important. But then, of course, how you design it and how you furnish it after is going to be even more important because you want to be able to attract people. You want to make your listing stand out. You want to go and copy the A+++ property that's within your area, but even better. There's another creator on YouTube that talks a lot about market analysis, and he basically talks about the McDonald's or the Burger King concept, where you'll notice that a lot of McDonald's will have Burger King right across the street. And although Burger King doesn't make as much as McDonald's, they make a pretty good amount, and they're still around. So it's like one of those things is you want to find the best performing property in that market, and you basically want to outdo them to the best of your ability. So that's one of the things that I would mention. But if you're noticing that there is way more properties that are listed online for Airbnb than potential demand, well then obviously that's a big indicator of either it's a slow market, it's not worth it, or it's just oversaturated. But what I've noticed is Houston has gone down. And when I say gone down, I don't mean like gone down in revenue. I mean it's gone down where a lot of people got out of that market because it was saturated. So there's like these fluctuations in markets, right? Where some years it's really, really saturated and there's way too many units. And then in other years, there's nobody there. And it's your opportunity to pick up units for a good price. Because that's another thing I noticed is even though Scottsdale is getting a little bit more saturated, I've noticed a lot of the homeowners are starting to drop their prices. Because in 2023, it was so popular. It was so poppin'. Now, the rent that used to be $5,000 is close to $3,000. So, or if a rent was $3,500, I'm seeing it for $26,000. So there's a lot of different things that are changing, but you have to be able to pay attention to that, right? So if you have markets that you're really, really adamant about, it's important you do your research. You got to do your research at the end of the day. It's your business. You need to know what you're doing and make sure that you're following the proper steps and you're doing the due diligence. Another red flag that I've noticed is unstable seasonality patterns. We saw this a lot with Joshua Tree. Joshua Tree was super popular during the pandemic, but do you hear a lot of people going to Joshua Tree anymore? No. And if they are, where are they staying? They're staying in the unique, special properties that are designed and they're so cool and you want to do Instagram photos and things like that. That's not to say that the regular units aren't still winning. Regular units and properties are still going to win. People and contractors and business professionals and traveling nurses, they still need places to stay. And they don't need all the unique design. They just need a place that is functional. But you got to make sure that if you're just going to provide a functional space, that it's in a location where people that want a functional space are going to visit. Traveling nurses, business professionals, contractors, they're not going to Joshua Tree. If they are, they're probably going to go with the lowest priced option. And if you have a rent that's really high, well, the chances of you getting booked are going to be slim to none. When you see, or we can even talk about Palm Springs is super popular, I believe, during the winter months. We've never picked up anything in Palm Springs. We did have one available on our website, and it already had a short-term rental permit, but Palm Springs limits you, if I'm not mistaken, to only, I believe, 120 days worth of bookings. Or no, you can only have a certain number of reservations and no more than a certain number of days to be booked. It's just really messed up. It's just so screwed. It's so screwed, honestly. But they have a lot of seasonality. I believe this girl named Shelby Church, she had a property in Palm Springs, search her up on YouTube, where she was losing a ton of money during the summer. Let me just preface this again by saying, I am one of those people that believes you can win in almost any market with the right components. You can probably win in Palm Springs, but it's gonna be a hell, like hard. You can win in Joshua Tree, but you better make sure you have a pool. You can win in Houston, but you better make sure the rent is low and it's in a great location, smack dab in the middle. You can win, but you need to make sure you know what it's gonna take to win. Does that make sense? So that's just one of the things. These are just red flags. I'm not saying to avoid these. Just red flags. You got to pay attention, because if you see a red flag, you got to know how to maneuver around it. You got to know how to adapt. So seasonality is one of those red flags. Is if you are going to go into Scottsdale, if you are going to go into the Midwest, if you are going to go to Florida, if you are going to go to Joshua Tree, Palm Springs, you need to know the seasonality. And even if you pick up there, you better be ready to deal with the low seasons. Deal with the low months. Get someone in there for breaking even, maybe a little bit more if you can. That's what we do in Scottsdale. We have units in Scottsdale. The slowest time is during the summer. We're lucky if we break even. We're trying to get people in there for 4 to 6 weeks just at our standard rate. So then that way we're not losing money every month. So just again, keep those things in mind. Another thing, regulatory storm clouds, okay? I know I'm being dramatic here. We were also in Dallas for a long period of time. I love Dallas. Dallas treated me very well. I built my entire business off the back of Dallas, but they started implementing regulations. Now, keep in mind, when a city's about to implement regulations, it could be fairly quick or it could take a long period of time. Dallas has been talking about regulations for the last few years and still nothing is set in stone. But if a market doesn't have any serious regulations and they're not in talks about it, that doesn't mean they're not going to have any in the future. So if you are doing arbitrage, one of the most important things to do when you are signing these contracts is having some type of clause. And again, I'm not a lawyer, so consult one before you take any advice from me. But always make sure, and what I make sure I have is a clause that says if in the event the city bans short-term rentals or they make a change that prevents us from running our business, you will let us out of our lease within a reasonable amount of time, usually 60 days. We still have to pay for those last 2 months, but that gives you time to finish out your reservations. Yeah, you're paying the last 2 months, but you're still collecting money. And then it gives you time to kind of figure out where you're going to go next. And it gives the owner time to figure out who they're going to lease to next, a long-term tenant. And that's what I saw in Dallas. So there was regulations that were taking place and we thought we were going to have to end our lease. We had a clause, but they took forever, so we got to keep our lease. But that's one of the things to also pay attention to, because I have a lot of people that will reach out to us and be like, I really want something in Dallas. Are you sure? Because regulations are showing that if you're not in a very specific zone, you're not going to be able to Airbnb. And if you are in an outside zone from what they allow, you have to be owner occupied, or you can only do it for a certain period of time. So that's just something that you have to pay attention to. You have to, depending on what markets you want, paying attention to regulations and what that's going to consist of and what is needed. Like, for example, some of the friendliest cities in the country are Charlotte, a lot of the Carolinas, Florida. There's a good amount of them in Florida that are super friendly. A lot of the big ones have gotten a little bit more strict, but not to the extent of like, oh, I can never Airbnb here. No, you can still, Florida is big. California is very strict, but there are some markets where they're not that bad. So it really just depends. But sometimes it's good if they have regulations, just hopefully not too strict to where it's almost impossible, like Palm Springs or Anaheim or Nashville. Places like that are very, very difficult unless you get something in the proper zone or if it's already permitted. But if you can find these properties and if they have regulations, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It usually pushes out the people that aren't serious or the people that try to do it the easy way and under the table, which is never a good idea. And I don't know why I left out Las Vegas. Las Vegas is also very strict. That's where I first started. I started right before they implemented the regulations. And then what did I have to do? I had to let them go because of the regulations, which luckily I had clauses and I had like good landlords and management companies that just let us out. We didn't even have to put in a 60-day notice. But that's kind of how these things can play out if you don't have your bases covered. Another thing, there's a lot of these new hot markets that everyone is talking about that they all want to get into that are so popular. But just like Joshua Tree, it was popular for that period of time during the pandemic. Everybody was traveling domestically, things like that. Also, I noticed that Austin was a very, very, very hot market. I don't know about you guys, I am not a huge fan of Austin, and I really don't hear about a lot of people going there anymore. Not that they aren't, I'm just saying Austin is one of those places where it seemed like they have a great economy and they're constantly growing and they're, everyone wants to move there and it's awesome. But what about recently? Are a lot of people still moving there? Is it still as popular as it used to be? Those are things you need to pay attention to. Same thing with Nashville. Everybody's moving to Nashville. Okay, until how long? What's the next hot city? Everybody's moving to Charlotte. Okay, until how long? Like, those are things that you have to pay attention to. Also, Austin is very, very strict with their regulations. I don't even think they're allowing tier 2 or tier 3 permits anymore. They're only allowing tier 1, which tier 1 is owner occupied. But there's loopholes. You got to do your research, guys. You got to look, you got to find, you got to think, where do I want to be? You got to figure out what your goal is. If you're just open to any unit, well then find something with almost no regulations. No regulations, low rent, decent location. You better furnish and design it phenomenally. Like, that's all I have to say. And then let's go ahead and go into the last red flag. So last red flag would probably be hidden cost traps. So whenever you're signing a lease, you're not just signing a lease. You're not just paying the rent. You're paying for insurance. You're paying for electric. You're paying for water. You're paying for gas if there is any. Do these markets have normally high electric bills? Is the owner open to paying for the water? How's the insurance? Is it in a flood zone? Like, all of these things come into place, right? And if you're going, and of course, when you're looking at a deal and you're looking at these markets, you don't always have to go and like look at how much the potential cost would be for every single unit when you're looking at it. But when you're getting close to potentially signing a lease, making sure that you have legitimate estimates on how much extra you're going to have to pay on top of the rent. Because, for example, if you're in a hot market like Scottsdale or in Joshua Tree or like Las Vegas, the electric bill is going to be extremely high in the summer if you don't have solar. So you have to be able to account for those things as well and just kind of note, okay, well, not only is the low season in the summer, but the most expensive electric bill is in the summer as well. It's just knowing where hidden costs might sneak up on you a little bit. So that's always important to know as well. Again, like I said, insurance, if you're in a flood market or if you're in a market where insurance is a little bit higher, just being able to account for that. On top of that, maintenance. If there isn't a lot of potential team members or workers or cleaners and handymen in that area, you might have to pay out of pocket, especially if you only have one unit. It's not worth it to put someone on staff full time. If you have multiple units, that's a little bit different. But how much is maintenance usually going for? Like a quick errand to go and fix something, because if you're not local and you're remote, and also even if you are local, you probably don't want to be going to the property every other day to fix something or to change something or to charge something like a battery or whatever. So knowing how much the average cleaning cost is in that area, what the good cleaners are going for, what the good handymen and reliable handymen are going for, like those are all things that you want to pay attention to. So make sure that you're doing your due diligence. I guess the whole point of this whole video, if I was to give you one piece of advice, due diligence. Do your diligence, literally. You don't want to rely on outdated data, and you don't want to just follow the crowd blindly. When everyone's saying like, oh, Nashville's so hot, Nashville's so great. Great. Well, go do your due diligence. Oh, Austin isn't that bad. Austin's still doing great. You can get a tier 1 permit and not have to be owner occupied. Okay, go do your due diligence. What is that loophole? Is it legal? Like, all of these things come into play. Do your due diligence. If you're not willing to do your due diligence, you should pay someone to do it for you. And usually the person that you're paying to do it for you is a lawyer. And even sometimes they don't really know. So sometimes you just have to put in the work. If you're serious about Airbnb and arbitrage, being willing to put in some of the work. At the end of the day, it's your business, it's your investment, it's your money, it's your partner's money. Like, all of this plays a part. So here's how you can manage these red flags effectively. Number 1 is you can have a systematic checklist. Systematic checklist would be something along the lines of, where do I want my next property to be? Okay, what kind of size do I want it to be? Do I want it to be a 1-1, a 2-2, a 3-2? Do I want it to be larger, like a 4-2, a 4-3, 5-3? What are the average rents in that market? Okay, what are some of the best areas to pick up units in that market for short-term rentals? Great, let's start calling through them. Oh, I got 3 yeses already. Ooh, let's look into the numbers. Okay, this one looks like it's going to generate about $50,000 a year, but this one's showing 75. What's the difference? Okay, let's say I go with the one that's going to gross me about 75K. Well, how much are the average cleaning costs in this market? What's the average utility bill? Are there handymen that are local? What are their average rate? What are the regulations like in this market? Like, those all play a part, right? And that is what I mean when having a systematic checklist. Location, type of property, regulations, revenue, costs. Like all of those things are what you want to be looking for, right? I'd say the first thing that you want to figure out is, okay, where do you want to be? And depending on where you want to be, how strict are the regulations? If you want to be in Charleston, South Carolina, good luck. That's all I have to say. But if you want to be in a place like Indianapolis, Indiana, then for sure, like good luck. Like that's actually like a good luck. Like yes, little to no regulations. It just depends. Okay. So I'd always start with what market do you want to be in? What are the regulations like? Depending on that, you'll take the next step and you'll start looking for properties that align with what you want and what your budget is for the rent. Because at the end of the day, you're more than likely still going to have to apply. And then depending, let's say if you really want Dallas, but you don't want to move forward until the regulations are actually like set in stone and they actually pass some type of law, well then you'll just want to document your analysis. So just monitor the markets that you want to be in, monitor the markets that stand out to you, and see what makes the most sense for you and what you're looking for. And if they pass regulations and you know exactly where you need to look, then that's great. And if they don't pass regulations and the short-term rental operators win to where they don't have all these strict rules, then great. You can just go and pick up any unit that you see fit. But hopefully that helps. Now, if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by all these warning signs, don't worry. We have created a comprehensive regulation spreadsheet because at the end of the day, a lot of these red flags goes into, okay, what are the regulations like in a market? How much is a home projected to make? What are the estimated costs? And overall the seasonality. Well, we have an entire website where we have listings throughout the country that are all not only pre-approved for short-term rentals, but they're in markets where the home is eligible for a permit or a short-term rental license. We also have a comprehensive regulation spreadsheet which shares all of the different markets we've searched in and analyzed up to this point. This provides steps on obtaining a permit along with links to key resources. All of the markets are also color-coded based on level of difficulty to obtain a permit. So you'll be able to know, okay, the ones that are shaded in gray are super strict, I want to stay away from them. The ones that are in red, okay, they have rules and regulations, but they're doable. Then the ones that are clear or transparent, those ones are like off to the races, let's go. Almost no regulations, almost no restrictions, which there's a lot of them. So, because I know it sounds like you guys hear it in the news, oh, this city's banning short-term rentals, this city no longer allows Airbnb, oh, they're shutting all these properties down in New York, oh, the world's on fire. No, there are a ton of markets still throughout the US that you can get into that are still profitable, that have little to no regulations, okay? So if you want more information on this, just go ahead and visit LoCasa to get instant access to our spreadsheet and start analyzing markets like a pro. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch our next video on STR market selection strategies. Thanks, guys. See you next time.